Welcome back, everyone. My name is Bruce Butterill. I'm the Executive Director of the America's Central Securities Depository Association. And as Anna mentioned before the break, I'll be guiding you through the remainder of today's program. We hope you had a productive break, albeit a little shorter than we had originally planned, but are now looking forward to hear from the next panel. This panel will discuss the importance of cross-border convergence in post-trade, current externalities of national legislations, and the principal areas of post-trade where the global convergence would be beneficial to achieve deeper global integration of capital markets. We welcome the moderator of this panel, Guillaume Elliott, the CEO of Euroclear France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and the panelists for this session. Over to you, Guillaume.
Thank you, Bruce, and welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's a pleasure for me to be moderating this panel on global regulatory convergence on CSD-related matters, and I'm extremely pleased to have with me a group of 4 highly distinguished panelists. Let me introduce them to you. We have Jasa Johansen. Jasa Johansen, good afternoon, Jasa. You are EMEA Head of CCM and Global Head of Product Strategy at Bank of New York Mellon. Thank you for being with us, Jasa. With you, Jasa, we have also John Siena. John Siena is Associate General Counsel with Brown Brothers Harriman. Good afternoon, John, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We have also Takeshi Shirakami. Takeshi, you are Deputy Head of Secretariat at the BIS. Thank you very much also for being with us this afternoon. And last but not least, of course, we have Juan Carlos Alfaro. Juan Carlos is Deputy Superintendent for Capital Markets in the Financial Government of Colombia. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, also for representing Latin America with us this afternoon. We can't hear you, Juan Carlos. You're on mute.
Good morning. Sorry about that.
Good morning, Juan Carlos. Well, we will be discussing this topic of global regulatory convergence in the post-trade areas, and especially on CSD-related matters. And well, my feeling is that it's quite a timely exercise that we are doing here, because we are celebrating, in a way, the 10th anniversary of the PFMI. And the PFMI, these principles for market infrastructures, could be maybe considered, at least for lawyers, as the cornerstone or the backbone of all the work that has been done during this past 10 years in terms of regulatory convergence in the post-trade areas. Of course, not only CSDs, but clearing also and all other infrastructure. And so I find very timely that we can have this conversation between us on this topic of global regulatory convergence. And we will start by taking stock a little bit of the PFMI and asking ourselves, how far have we gone? What are the next steps towards global regulatory convergence? We know that we are still living in a quite fragmented framework with also various business models in the CSD world. So it will be good to see what has been achieved and what we could achieve in the future. We will have also an important discussion with Juan Carlos about the experience in Latin America of integration of Peru, Chile, and Colombia markets. It's integration in live, and you will explain how you have been able to achieve this and what could have been the difficulties also in terms of regulation between the three countries. And then we will discuss all together also what are the next challenges for tomorrow, for today or tomorrow. on regulatory convergence. We know that we have been all working hard on sanctions, for instance, or we are also reflecting on innovation, DLT, and all these topics also will be of importance in the next year. So it would be good also to see what kind of global regulation we could have on this topic. So maybe first to start with what we can say about the PFMI and taking stock a little bit of the PFMI. And I think we should first ask the standard set of perspectives. So Takeshi, you are at the BIS, so very well placed to discuss the PFMI. So in your view, how far have we gone? What do you believe we should do to move the next step on this topic? So the floor is yours, Takeshi, on the PFMI.
Thank you, Guillaume. I'm Takeshi Shirakami from the CPMI Secretariat at the BIS. So first of all, I'd like to thank Bruce and other colleagues of the World Forum of CSDs for this kind invitation. And I also thank members of the forum for engaging with us, CPMI, on various issues and topics related to not only CSDs, but also other FMIs that we CPMI has been working on together with IOSCO. And then as Guillaume rightly pointed out, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the PFMI. So the PFMI were published in April 2012 in response to the global financial crisis in 2007 and 8. And then as many of you may remember, so CPMI and CPMI IOSCO had 3 sets of international standards prior to the global financial crisis, covering systemically important payment systems, security settlement systems, and CCPs. By the way, last year, it was a 20th anniversary of the recommendations for security settlement systems. So we've come a long way, but as I will say, the journey is not ended. So, but anyway, so with the PFMI, so we added trade repositories to the another form of FMIs, and then we strengthened generally the original sets of standards in light of the lessons learned from the global financial crisis. And in the last 10 years, since the publication of the PFMI, so CPMI IOSCO have been making sure that the new standards are actually used in practice and in an effective manner, and then as intended. So making FMIs and financial systems more broadly, more resilient, efficient, and transparent. So for this purpose, I would say we have been working on 2 broad areas. The first, we are providing further clarifications and the explanations in the form of guidance reports to facilitate individual FMIs and also their authorities with their interpretation, implementation of selected principles of the PFMI according to the topics we selected for that exercises. And then secondly, CPMI and IOSCO have created a framework for monitoring the implementation of the PFMI in jurisdictions and also by individual FMIs. So we have a layer structure, level 1, level 2, and level 3 assessments, as many of you might be aware, be very familiar with. So level 1 is a self-assessment that on the whether a jurisdiction has completed the process of adopting the legislation and other policies that will enable it to implement the PFMI. And level 2 assessment talks about peer reviews among CPMI IOSCO member jurisdictions, authorities, to assess the extent to which the content of the jurisdiction's implementation measures is complete and consistent with what the PFMI say. And then level 3 is about at the level of individual FMIs. So it examines consistency in terms of outcomes of implementation of the PFMI at individual FMI levels. And then I'm sure many of you have been involved in some of these exercises in the last 10 years. And then with our guidance reports and implementation monitoring, we want to really achieve greater consistency across jurisdictions and level playing field. But it's easier said than done. So and then when I look back at the last 10 years, I see we have produced a large number of guidance reports regarding risk management of CCPs. This focus on CCPs is partly because of the G20 regulatory reform following the global financial crisis, which pushed for a greater use of central clearing in financial markets. So as CCPs play a greater role in the financial system, we need to make sure CCPs remain robust and resilient and can act as a source of financial stability in stress times rather than creating a new risk or becoming a source of contagion. So we produce lots of guidance reports on CCPs. However, we also have worked on the other topics which are more relevant to this industry and other types of FMI. For example, we have produced guidance on cyber resilience and expanding Principle 17 on operational risks of the PFMI. And recently, CPMI USCO conducted a stock-taking exercise on how FMIs have been strengthened their cyber resilience. And also we conducted some similar stock-taking exercise in the context of level 3 assessment regarding business continuity planning, which we published a report about it on it last year. And here I can say lots have been achieved, but there may be areas for further improvements in terms of the cyber and operational resilience of FMIs in general. So for example, the so-called 2-hour recovery time objective set out in the PFMI and also cyber guidance is very challenging goal. We know that, we all know that. And then it is needless to say that the FMI ecosystem as a whole needs to be vigilant in light of the heightened concerns about cyber threats in the current geopolitical situation. So perhaps I should stop here and then give back the floor to you, Guillaume.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Takeshi. I think you're right. There's probably huge work that has been done post PFMI also, and it was great that you could record it. And I believe that we have indeed achieved more stability in the post-trade area thanks to all this work. Maybe with more progress on the CCP area, as you mentioned, rather than on CSD, but still we all feel that it's a huge work that has been achieved by CPMI already. Maybe turning now to John to have a more, I would say, European perspective on the regulatory convergence in Europe. Of course, we had CSDR, we had the Shareholder Right Directive, we had many texts. What would you say? Is Europe, leading a little bit the journey, or are we lagging behind in terms of convergence? And also because you are in the UK, I would be also interested in understanding whether the UK will deviate or not. Well, we know that from CSDR, UK has already decided not to implement the settlement penalty regime, buy-in regime, for instance. But now that we are reviewing the CSDR in Europe, would you see any possible future deviation from your country? But first, a regulatory perspective, what would you say?
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, it's an honor to be speaking to this group and to the World Forum. I'm really very grateful for the opportunity. I think that the real challenge in terms of what I'm spending most of my time on, it feels like we've got sort of dueling paradigms. One is addressing all of these questions of convergence that you addressed, Guillaume, but at the same time, what seems to be taking more and more time is innovation and technology and digital for the medium to long term. And so I'm finding that we need to be very conscious of both paths almost simultaneously as we work toward the sort of more immediate goals and the longer term goals at the same time. But very often we're trying to solve for the same problem. That seems to be a thematic point that I'm dealing with day in and day out. I think that, as I've said in the past, it's almost cliche about the need for industry segments, market actors, different parts of the market infrastructure to work together, to coordinate and communicate. I've often made a plea in that regard, including at the WFC in the past. And it does sound like a statement of the obvious and a bit cliche, but I guess what I'd like to emphasize is that if anything, that's become even more important and actually has crystallized, I think, because of CSDR and SRD2 and shareholders' rights, and what's emerged is the need for that really close coordination and communication, to the point where we've had to almost formalize a governance structure in Europe, in particular, across different industry segments. That includes, the buy side, the sell side, the issuers, the issuer agents, obviously market infrastructure, including CCPs, as well as the CSDs, and then the intermediaries, the direct and indirect participants. We've all had to come together because the development and reform efforts across Europe have required it. I think Europe is a special case to some extent, but it also provides a window on the larger challenge globally. It's a special case because it consists of 27 independent member states, each with obviously their own market infrastructure, as we're all aware in this webcast, but also with different bodies of law, different market practices, different requirements locally, different approaches to things like withholding tax and shareholder rights, and the list goes on. That in particular has required a lot of this kind of coordination to try to find ways to harmonize approaches across the complexity that is Europe. And again, as we all know, Europe has long had a goal as part of the Capital Markets Union agenda to sort of reverse a longstanding reality, which is that capital raising in Europe is by and large driven by bank financing, and the goal, of course, under the Capital Markets Union has been to really make the capital markets much more efficient, much better on a cross-border basis, recognizing the reality of the independent member states and the market practices that exist. So I wouldn't necessarily say to be more like the U.S., but in the U.S. obviously has an extremely efficient capital markets regime with one CSD, because it achieved the kind of harmonization that Europe wants to achieve. So this is really something we're all working toward to support. And I would emphasize again the need for that kind of coordination. I think with CSDR, there was also obviously a focus on settlement discipline. And when we think in terms of settlement discipline and improving settlement discipline, again, this was to enhance and achieve the Capital Markets Union, that there were sort of two elements to it. One was, of course, this idea of mandating buy-in, and the other was the so-called penalty mechanism. And again, critical for industry segments to work together to have a common sort of conversation, a common language with public authorities to ensure that there's an understanding of what buy-in actually means, what it translates to, is it sensible in the context of settlement discipline or not. And again, many of you are aware that we have a very significant discussion underway with the European Commission and other public authorities around whether mandatory buy-in actually makes sense, and if it does, in what setting. And we're hopeful in the industry that we've convinced public authorities that it actually doesn't make sense as a settlement discipline measure. So we're focused on, an effective penalty mechanism, which the CSDs, of course, are absolutely central to, crucial, critical. And again, the complexity of Europe makes that more of a challenge. I think when you look at all of this, it provides a window on how these types of questions and issues might radiate beyond Europe if we think in terms of global convergence in the PMI. So I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned there in terms of what we've attempted to do in the industry to achieve that kind of common language and collaboration. The last thing I'll mention is on SRD2. I think it's been even probably more crucial to the point where we've had to establish market standards, some of which needed effective endorsement by public authorities to try to harmonize really very different and divergent approaches to corporate law, to recognition of shareholder rights. I mean, who is the shareholder? Depending on national law, it could vary. That hasn't been harmonized across Europe. How attributions of entitlements work. Again, the list goes on. Really crucial for us to come together to find that common language. So what might have been cliche in the past, and what people might have assumed as a statement of the obvious is now really, hit us to the point where we need to actually have a formal governance structure where we've created steering groups across the industry to coordinate this stuff. So maybe I'll stop there and hand the floor back.
Thank you, Don. Interesting, and you're right to say that there's still some progress to make in terms of, I would say, standardization of corporate law or securities law, and you are asking the basic question that lawyers are asking to themselves: where are the securities? Who is the owner of the security? Where is the cash? And well, that's still the basic question that we still have. So yes, still. Quite a journey ahead of us, but that's interesting questions for lawyers, at least. And we were talking about regulations and European directives, but we can also see that a convergence is also coming from more operational work, standardization, more on the ground, and maybe Jesa, because you have worked on this particular topic of standardization on collateral. Maybe you can also give your view on this particular work that you have been doing. How we can really move towards more convergence through this kind of more operational standardization.
Yes, sure. And first of all, quickly, I'm the collateral specialist here on this panel, right? So I'm representing the collateral business for BNY Mellon, very strong from a tri-party agent perspective. And the first reaction to Takeshi, because you've kind of referenced all of the PFMI standards, right? And some of it has originated out of a financial crisis. And at the same time, we do not have PFMIs for the collateral market infrastructure, right? So that's, I should probably not be asking for more kind of regulation applicable to my business, but that's actually kind of the point of what we have tried to address then, in absence of global regulatory standards, right? In the Euro system, in the advisory group on securities and collateral infrastructure, we came together as a collateral harmonization task force for Europe. And we have kind of worked together with all actors across the collateral industry, tri-party agents, but also the users of kind of collateral management. And we have defined our own standards, right? Because I think the industry needs common standards, in particular as collateral plays such a crucial role for the stability of our system. And so from that perspective, what we have achieved, and I think Europe only took a lead here, but it's not limited to Europe, we've defined a single collateral rule book for Europe. And we've done this on 3 key areas: tri-party collateral management, the billing processes around collateral management, and a key topic always, I think, in the post-trade industry is corporate actions, right? And also linking to the issues that John mentioned, obviously, with kind of legislative and also tax regimes being very different, that continues to be, I think, a headache for our industry. But at the same time, right, I mean, why did we come together as a collateral industry? Because we believe there is a need for a global convergence of tri-party collateral management. And even though we took a lead for Europe, I think it's not limited to Europe, because if you have all major tri-party agents at the table, sometimes the implementing actors can take a lead by themselves of helping our regulators, right, driving regulatory convergence, right? I think it takes always two to tango, and we don't have to wait for regulators or legislators telling us what has to be done. We can also take a lead and be part of defining what should be the best industry practices. And this is where I see SCORE really playing kind of out and hopefully becoming successful. And we are doing all of this based on one common messaging standard, ISO 20022, as the new messaging standard. And if we have all implementing actors really adjusting to this new standard, I think we can play a major role of making the collateral markets safer, more efficient, and at the end, really giving liquidity into the market, which is at the heart of this initiative. I think here the call in terms of global regulatory convergence is Europe took a lead. We are asking other jurisdictions, other players in the market, really kind of reviewing what we have developed. We need help to adjust it probably to a more global landscape now, right? But it's a foundation, I think, that can be built upon. And then obviously the wheel never stops. We have developed ISO 20022 as a messaging standard, but we also see the developments for common domain model in the industry, which I think is a really important initiative that has a lot of kind of potential to help us drive regulatory conversions. And so I think that's where we need to stay focused. We're seeing the US regulators starting to use common domain model for regulatory reporting purposes, right? So I still think there is a call for more kind of actions to help us drive this efficiency.
Yeah, thank you, Tessa. Takeshi, how do you react to that? Do you believe that, well, when the market organize itself to produce standards, well, you should leave this to them, or do you have in mind to also create on top of that some kind of global principles for collateral, but for also other kinds of topics? How do you see this functioning together?
If I give you a rather fundamental philosophical approach that we would take, is that if a market is functioning, then I think a public authority's role is to just foster that kind of initiatives. And then if we see clearly market failure, then we might need to consider providing guidance or even standards. And then I think that's would be a basic approach. So, I'm happy to see the industry developments initiatives in this area, and then together with the perhaps potentially relevant standards from the PFMI, which might be also relevant for the management of collateral, use of repo or securities lending, and the also use of CCPs in terms of the risk managing in this area. So there, I think we would hope the industry would also take into account what the PFMI say about these, sort of this associated areas, or near close, the areas that are close to the collateral management. So that's what I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Takeshi, and this is that was the approach of the collateral harmonization task force. We had actors from the CSD, from the CCP space, the central banks, right? And so in a way, each of us brought our respective regimes into the discussion, right? But we tried to make it really unique and applicable to the collateral context.
Yeah, I think the ECB and the central banks, really have been great, very helpful. They've been facilitators of this kind of approach led by the industry, but absolutely with their their benevolent gaze. I think that's been really important.
Yeah, it's striking to see that, well, we can achieve harmonization both way, in fact, either by having global standards prepared at at global level and then implemented locally, but also the other way around, having some standardization on the ground. And I'm always interested to see how messaging standards play a key role also in harmonizing rules. And so it's great to see that it can go both way, but to achieve at the end more convergence, more stability, less risk for the market. So that's extremely interesting. What we see as well is that it's good to have standards, it's good to have global principles, but we still may be facing some diverging interpretations from regulators, from local regulators, and this is also a topic that I think we have to address. And I will turn now to Juan Carlos, because Juan Carlos, you have achieved in Colombia with Chile and Peru this integration of markets, not only the settlement layers, but also clearing and exchanges, if I understood correctly. And this question of how have you dealt with this potentially different legislation locally, this various regulators locally, how have you achieved this integration with this an important element of regulators being in different regulators, maybe different interpretation as well. It would be interesting to have also this lessons learned from this integration, which looks like quite a model, at least on the paper. So tell us, how does it work?
Okay, thank you, Guillaume, and to the other panelists, and to organizers for inviting us and allowing us to share this experience and learn from you all. Well, this process in Latin America started like 10 years ago with the creation of the Latin American Integrated Market, that what is known as MILA. And since then, most of the agents, like the exchanges, the infrastructures, the market participants, and the regulators and supervisors have been working together in trying to achieve what is needed to have an integrated market. It started at the beginning as a model for being able to trade within the three exchanges of the three countries and Mexico, plus Mexico, but with the use of a correspondent broker. So it wasn't an integrated market, but allowed the investors to redirect their orders and trade in the different venues. Then afterwards, the four governments signed an agreement called the Pacific Alliance, and it has like a broader aim, a broader scope in not only integrated markets, but achieving more financial integration in all respects. So the objectives were more broadened, and the four governments, with Mexico included, defined an agenda on the topics that we would like to address. So it's not only related to market infrastructures, but also cybersecurity, innovation, tax issues, and protection for investors in the four countries. So it has a full agenda. Now we have in the process of we have the decision made by the three exchanges of Peru, Chile, and Colombia to integrate, and the process is just beginning. It got the approval of the shareholders of the three stocks to sign that and build and create a new model and a new way of working. And there are still a lot of definitions that have to be made in the process. What would be the business model? How would it work? But from the supervisors and regulators' perspective, there is we have made the decision to go with the process and actually work together to finally help and achieve the market integration that we wanted from a state level. So there is a clear public policy that was defined to achieve that. Since the beginning since the creation of MILA, the 4 supervisors have been working together. We have a cooperation and supervisory committee where we all attend and share information, discuss convergence or harmonization regulations that need to be made in order to achieve the financial integration of the 3 markets. So far, it hasn't been that successful in some regards, because we set or we issue some regulations that were intended to promote that integration. For example, a fund passport. So if an investment fund was recognized in one jurisdiction, it was automatically recognized in the other. However, that hasn't worked yet. If, for example, in Colombia, we don't have any like fund from the other, or one of the other countries that has been registered here or is being distributed here in our jurisdiction. We also issue a regulation that recognizes the issuance of securities in all in the 4 jurisdictions. So, for example, if there was an issuance in one of the 3 other countries, it would be automatically recognized in Colombia. However, foreign issuers prefer to do the complete filing, the full filing here in Colombia and the other jurisdictions, instead of going to this recognition process that we designed. So and the questions are why it's not working, and there are still a lot of tax issues. The clearing process, because we have 3 different currencies. So the clearing process, tax issues, shareholder rights or proxies that need to be sorted out. But there is the clear decision in terms of public policy that we need to move towards that. And we are accompanying the process, working together with the other 2 regulators from Chile and Peru, and in close contact with the exchanges. And the work ahead is huge, because we have 3 exchanges, 2 CCPs, and 3 CSDs. And in order to harmonize, the regulations, the principles that each of the infrastructures apply, in terms of, for example, finality and all that, the task ahead is quite challenging, but there is a determination from the supervisor's point of view. I'm talking in behalf of the Colombian authorities, but from the conversations that we have had with the other 2 countries, it seems like there is a determination to move forward.
Juan Carlos, it's a very, very ambitious project, and that you are having here. But I understand that, well, it already took 10 years to achieve the first step and try to harmonize
Yes.
regulations. So, well, we have this experience of in Europe that, well, it takes time. We know that it takes time, but well, and it's, in a way, it's good to see that it takes time also elsewhere, not only in Europe. But well, maybe
I was just going to say, it sounds very familiar.
Yeah. But maybe an operational question. Does it mean that there will be a merger between the 3 companies, the 3 exchanges, or the 3 CSDs, or is it a cooperation arrangements between the 3 entities? Because if you have to go through a merger, then you will have the question of where will sit the company, results of the merger, and then in this context, some kind of more political aspects could also enter into the game. So what is the setup that you intend to put in place?
The arrangement that they have, or the architecture that they have chosen, is to create a holding company in Chile, and that holding company will have the ownership of the three exchanges and related infrastructures in the 3 countries. Then they will have to move forward in terms of choosing the business model and decide. But at the end, I mean, I think that we all are looking for have a bigger market, being able to access financing from the three different countries, and to have access to more diversification. So if we want to achieve that, it will have to go through a fully integration process. And also one of the objectives is like create a market that could attract foreign investment, for example, from Europe, from the States, from other parts of the world. And that would only happen if we have a bigger market and more depth in terms of liquidity, in terms of the amount of issuers, investors, investment alternatives that they can have access to.
And in terms of supervision, do you intend to put in place some kind of college of supervisors or organization arrangement like that?
That hasn't been discussed, but I think that's the way to move eventually. Now, I mean, within the Pacific Alliance architectures and arrangements, there are several committees for cooperation, for sharing information, for promoting harmonization and convergence of regulation. But I think that at the end, we will need to look for a more formal instance and structure instance for sharing information, for really having a tool for assessing the risk profile and the financial situation of these infrastructures. And this will only can be happening, I think, through the supervisory college.
Sure.
But that hasn't been determined yet or defined yet.
Interesting and inspiring example that you are explaining to us, and well, good luck for the next steps, because well, the journey is not already you're not there yet, but well, it's you've done good progress, and that's well, the foundations are there. So that's extremely interesting. Thank you, Juan Carlos.
Thank you, William. We will tell you more about it in the future.
Yeah. Well, come back to this forum in 10 years to see where you are. Maybe we can switch to the other topic that we wanted to discuss all together, more about the new challenges ahead of us, and what we would need in terms of regulatory convergence going forward. And we have all in mind, well, important topics that would probably need some more convergence, and maybe starting with you, John, on all the, and you've mentioned already that on the innovation topic that we are all reflecting on new systems, DLT type of infrastructure, mixing or having in one go the trading, settlement, clearing and settlement, where we see popping up some regulations here and there, and we can ask ourselves whether we are not moving towards fragmentation again, where it could have been a good opportunity, starting from scratch, to create a unique or at least more standardized regulations. What is your view on this challenge?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's we could certainly talk all day about this, and I'll try to be brief. But I come at this, just to clarify, I come at this from a particular perspective. I'm a lawyer by training. I'm in the legal department of Brown Brothers, and yet I have this strange role as the chair of the European Committee of the Association of Global Custodians. So I do engage in a lot of obviously advocacy efforts on behalf of the industry, which requires me to learn a little bit more beyond the legal world. But I'm not an expert on the operational challenges or the systems challenges. I think Geza and others are closer to that stuff than I am probably. But having said all of that, the thing that is a bit frustrating is that it's interesting when you look at a lot of reform efforts underway over the past 5, 6, 7 years. Very often public authorities ask a question, even in existing legislation today or existing processes today, would digital help? We get that question a lot. Would would a digital solution solve the problem or improve efficiency, safety, asset safety, et cetera? We see that question all the time. And, everything from AFMD regarding investment funds to SRD2. In fact, dialogues are underway on shareholder rights to look at digital solutions. All these discussions have been sort of taking place for some time. But what's happening, I think, is as always the case, the innovators and the disruptors, quite rightly, were first to the party. They were the ones that sort of moved the ball and got everyone excited. And we've had massive interest and a lot of demand that has, I'd say, sort of captured people's attention, captured people's imagination. You have regulators and governments who have been trying to catch up. There's been a bit of a race to be a jurisdiction or location of choice for a fintech or platform. And so I think the hard work of harmonization and truly thoughtful development, that's always going to come last. And I think that's fundamentally the challenge we've had. I think in particular, the legal community, of which I'm a part, has been sort of the last to the party. We're seeing enormous efforts in legal reform in the US under the Uniform Commercial Code. The UK Law Commission is working to develop views on English law, treatment of property rights under a digital regime. We're seeing this happen in different ways in different jurisdictions throughout the world. And meanwhile, in Europe, I think, again, because of the divergent nature of national law across Europe, we're not seeing an attempt to sort of create sort of a harmonized approach under law. It's more of almost like a regulatory rule book, a code of conduct, if you will, that will be created around crypto assets that will try to find a common approach. That's MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. And at the same time, we've got the pilot regime, which of course is closer to this world. And that really is intended to try to create some initial really a sandbox to allow market infrastructure to find a place in this world, and for the rest of us to figure out how to plug into it fundamentally. And so we're still in the middle of that discussion. And as you said, Guillaume, I mean, there are questions still being discussed around whether and to what extent trading and settlement are the same thing. Would a trade instruction be the same thing as a settlement instruction? How would these transactions settle? Would they be settled in Bitcoin? Would they require fiat currency or CBDCs or what have you? I mean, these are still under discussion, again, from a sort of a regulatory perspective. And yet at the same time, we're seeing different countries implement their own visions under national law around whether a property right exists or not, and which types of assets might be covered under their digital assets law and which may not be. The list goes on. So I think the challenge is enormous. It's exciting. I mean, I think we all believe this is where we've got to go. And the thing we have to remind ourselves is that ultimately we're talking about tools that could be used to make the entire system safer, more efficient, and better and quicker. Obviously, we talk about T+0 by way of example. How do we get there? I think that's great, but the other problem is what's grabbing the headlines is what we're seeing. For example, in the U.S. With statements by platforms to the effect that customers will not have any property rights, so they'll be general unsecured creditors of the platform. We see, obviously scandals in cryptocurrencies and the like, and that seems to be the focus. So regulators are focused on addressing that risk, but at the same time, I think that just means that the rest of us in the industry and market infrastructure really need to grab the nettle, as we say in the UK, and start to push this forward on a harmonized basis to the extent we can do that ourselves.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right to say that we are living in quite amazing times, and we will see. Of course, there's a lot on the plate of the Commission at this time with MiCA, the DLC pilot regime, and we will see. But there's I would say, a strong hope that we can really move towards more harmonization from the very beginning on all this this topic. Yes, thank you, Don. There's another topic, maybe Jesa, which is less innovative probably, but more and more in the headlines today. It's the international sanctions, and probably many of your companies, organizations have been struggling with the implementation of the recent sanctions, which is huge work for all the industry. And here again, we may wish some more harmonization. Is it a topic that you also are working on, Jesa?
I mean, I think we have all gone kind of 19 days intense kind of sanctions processing, but it's, be it now Russia, Ukraine, has it been China, right? I mean, I think sanctions become part of our kind of industry processing, right? We have to be equipped to handle whatever is the next sanction efficiently and harmonized across the industry. And if you look at it, I think it's normal, right? It comes from national interest that sanctions are applied to a certain national interest in mind. I think that's what we expect. There has been, I think, some kind of agreement around the major jurisdictions, Europe, UK, US, in terms of the general sanctions. But then there were, I think it's fair to say, differences on how to apply the sanctions, and also differences on how much clarity was provided along with the sanctions. And that leads, kind of lack of clarity leads to room for interpretation, right? And if you have room for interpretation, I guess this is what many of us have seen, and also many of our clients have suffered from, that different actors in the chain had to apply their own kind of interpretation of the rules, and that has led to different decisions throughout the custody chain. And that's obviously has unintended consequences. It might have market impacts. It can cause into kind of, in Europe, you run into late settlements and settlement failures, right? And all of it is because of kind of the application of the rules wasn't fully transparent to the different actors in the custody chain. So I think there's still something for us to look at. What can we draw from other initiatives that we have in the industry that can also kind of make this part of the processing more efficient, right? Because transparency in the custody chain, I think, is a core theme for us all. And I guess we have worked many years to establish that omnibus accounts are very important for the post-trade industry. But then at the same time, it means what can we do to accelerate the transparency of kind of those omnibus accounts, be it SRD2 or additional ideas around withholding tax, KYC, right? It never stops, right? But I think we all have to figure out, if we had better transparency in the custody chain, then we will also be able to more efficiently process sanctions or other financial crime activities, yeah? And I think that's for the benefit of all of us. And also having very clear rules of who is responsible in the custody chain. If I use this kind of example from the corporate actions industry, we have the golden source, right? Where we have agreed that only the golden source defines the rule, and then each of us, the players in the industry, have to apply the golden source principle. That wasn't the case in sanctions processing, right? Many of us had to end up with their own sanctions team trying to do the right interpretation. So I think some of the industry working groups that we have established globally, there's still probably analogies that we can draw to help us get better on it, yeah?
Yes, and Jason, you're right. Implementing sanctions along the custody chain is a huge work, and I can recall also a situation where we had some kind of conflicting sanctions and coming from different areas, and well, it's not really the case with the Ukrainian sanctions, but we had, of course, the situation with the Iranian sanctions in the past, where we could have also plead in favor of a kind of more political coordination group organization between the US and Europe to avoid global institutions to be trapped in the middle of the conflicting sanctions. So on this topic, yes, sure, we would hope for more convergence also going forward. I don't know, Juan Carlos, if it is also a topic that it is looked at when you are integrating your markets. These questions of international sanctions is also a sanction which is reflecting on or not at this stage, because, well, you first have to build your setup and then you will tackle the issue when they come.
Oh, of course. I mean, it is an issue, an important issue in the current situation. All market infrastructures need to be, aware and have sensible processes for taking care of these international sanctions, and obviously will be a topic in the arrangements and the setup that will be developed.
Yeah, sure. I think it will be a question at some point in time in the process.
Yes,
thank you, Juan Carlos. I see that time is flying. I would like to maybe conclude with you, Takeshi, because I'm coming back to the innovation and DLT topics that we have discussed with John a minute ago. Well, let me be a little bit provocative, but will the PFMI still be relevant in a pure DLT world where we would have infrastructure using this DLT system? Are you reflecting on some kind of update of the PFMI, new version of the PFMI to cover the tokenized assets and the digital currencies? What is the future of the PFMI in this innovative world?
So first of all, I think PFMI will still be relevant. Although I have to say my view is not entirely without bias, but I do hope the PFMI will be relevant. And then I give you a couple of examples. So first, the CPMI score is now finalizing the draft guidance report on the application of PFMI to stablecoin arrangements. So focusing on the transfer function of stablecoin arrangements that are systemically important. And then we are basically saying PFMI apply to these arrangements, full stop. And then we provide several guidance or further clarifications in light of the novel features of the some of the stablecoin arrangements. But the PFMI are designed to be high level, and then we take functional approach, and then we take a technologically neutral approach. For these reasons, I do believe PFMI are still applicable to these new arrangements. And then when it comes to the use of DLT by other types of FMIs, I think this is a very interesting topic and very important topic. And then this might raise some issues around settlement finality, transfer of securities or funds or legal basis for that, and which are also covered by the PFMI. There may be the case that we might need to provide further guidance on these issues, but nonetheless, I do believe PFMI still apply to these new types of providing services. And then also, if with the new arrangement, trading, clearing, settlement on a single platform, the industry might provide very fast settlement or very, very short settlement cycle. But again, the PFMI provides some, thoughts on this issue in Annex C on so-called market recommendations. So there are still many things in the PFMI, and then we don't have to reinvent the wheels because of the new, arrangements. Otherwise, we would just create another set of principles, standards, and that might trigger yet another fragmentation across the industry. So let me stop here.
Okay, so happy birthday to the PFMI and long life to the PFMI.
Thank you.
That all sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think we are close to the end of this session now, so I'm not going to wrap up, but clearly we have heard very, very interesting input from all of you. Of course, PFMI has been key in really establishing stability, and huge work has been done. We know that there are still a lot of topics to cover and issues to tackle, with this point that we still have tax, securities law, tax law, corporate law, etc., which are still difficult to tackle. But we see with Juan Carlos, some countries are still moving forward despite all these difficulties. So it was a great example, and we see as well that the reality and the innovation and the sanctions and all these topics will give us more opportunity for convergence. So we still have, all of us, work on our plate and many opportunity to discuss this topic again in some future session of the World Forum. So I wanted to thank you very, very much. It has been an honor for me to be moderating this discussion. Thank you, Jesa, John, Takeshi, and Juan Carlos for this session, and take care.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Guillaume, and I'd like to add my thanks to the panelists for a very interesting discussion. We are going to take a short break and then come back for an update on regional developments, and then hear our final keynote address of the day from Manmohan Singh, a senior researcher at the IMF. So I invite you to be back with us at 1:15 when we'll restart with the next panel. Thank you.